Hi, everybody. My name is Debbie Hayes, and welcome to the World of Pets podcast. We want our dogs and other animals to live as long as possible, but we want them to have a healthy life. And we feel here that we have found something that can facilitate that. It is a product. We call it a treat, but it's actually something that is going to support their immune health. And we want to share a little bit about that with you, but mostly we want to discover everything about pets and laugh and cry when we tell their stories. So today we have Cherie, our furry friends, and she trains dogs, and she is going to tell us a little bit about that. So, Sheree, you can take it away, and if you see me like raise my hand or something like that, just let me, let me ask my question.
Okay, of course.
But thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. My pleasure. So when you and I talked about doing the podcast together, which was very nice of you, I had mentioned briefly about how I got started with people and dog training. So I thought I would just talk briefly about myself, not too long or too boring, but just to give people kind of a sense of how I got here. Back in the 90s, I really was taken by watching people work with horses and doing more natural horsemanship and working with the horses, taking in account their psychology and their point of view instead of just being kind of lost in our own. And I really liked the whole concept of learning how to speak horse and be like the lead mare and communicate. I mean, obviously, I'm still a human, I'm still on two legs, um, but to incorporate some understanding. And I just thought that was so nifty and decided that I wasn't quite ready to take on a 1,000-pound animal that had fear, aggression, or a lot of behavioral issues. So I sought out people who are doing the same thing with dogs. And I found two really good trainers in the Monterey Bay area. This was back in the 90s. And I studied under them and co taught with them. And I learned so much and I did lots of reading. And sort of what I've gotten to 25, 26 years later is a lot of my lessons that I do with people, whether it's in person or in group classes or video or however it goes, that I talk a lot about speaking the same language as their dogs because we are very wordy. I know I am. I love to talk. And a lot of times, us humans think that if we say a word again and again and again, the dog's going to go, oh, I understand that word and do it. So, one of the things I want to cover today is how do we come up with a common language and understand each other? How do we teach new commands? How do we deal with our own shortcomings? So, a lot of my work is training humans. The dogs are a lot easier. Us humans are very set in our ways. I know I am after, many decades. And so I thought I would just cover the highlights today of some of the pitfalls that us humans fall into when we forget that we're working with a different species.
Uh, Did you have a question?
Yes,
Or,
the
so,
woman in the front row.
so my understanding is that dogs can learn approximately 300 words. Is that something that you would concur with, or how?
I have read research on that. I think I've even heard higher numbers. Like there's border collies, I've heard like, a lot more. I don't know. I think if you've read that, that sounds fine. I don't do any close to that in my training classes, so I haven't researched that. But yeah, it's pretty cool though, isn't it? Yeah. Anything else on that?
No, I think that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to start with pitfall number one. So pitfall number one is probably one of the hardest ones that my students need to change. and helping their dog change their behavior. And this is what one of my teachers taught me in the mid to late 90s. And I never thought 28, 29 years later, I would be saying that phrase again and again and again. I knew it was important, but I had no idea until, I've been doing this for a long time. So the phrase is, every time you look at, talk to, or touch your dog, you're rewarding the behavior of that moment. So, for example, the biggest example is I work with a lot of people and their dogs on the dogs greeting politely instead of jumping up because, puppies and young trained dogs, untrained dogs, they want to get to our face, they want to connect. If they're young, they're teething and mouthy and they haven't been taught that we're not dogs. We don't want their teeth on us like other dogs do. We don't want their body slams like other dogs do. And so when a dog jumps on us, what do we normally do? Push them off, say no, look at them, talk to them. Now, there's some really sensitive dogs that if you sound a little bit annoyed, they'll be like, oh gosh, I'm really sorry. But most dogs are like, yay, you looked at me, you talked to me, you touched me. And for those dogs, the behavior doesn't go away, even when the person is annoyed and sounds annoyed. Like you take a happy-go-lucky lab or pit bull, and they're like, oh, cool, you talked to me, even if you're like, ugh, you're steaming. So remembering, giving attention to a dog's behavior. Now, I'm sure there's exceptions to everything, but in general, the best thing to do is to turn away, walk away, leave the room. They don't get one little thing that they want. Now, this would not apply if a dog is looking to you because they're really scared or really unsure about something. This is a dog who's being pushy and hasn't learned yet to sit to greet. Yes.
So what about bringing your knee up to catch them in the chest when they're jumping?
So and I love your questions. Thank you. So much more fun than just blabbing on my own. So a lot of people are still giving and receiving that advice. And I remember hearing that advice, 20, 30 years ago. And the way I explain it is it might work for a few dogs, because if I said, oh no, that doesn't work, don't do that, there's going to be people saying, well, I did that and it worked. But in general, you're looking at, talking to, and touching your dog. If you are wanting to use what's called positive punishment, which is a bad thing happens when the dog does the wrong thing, you're using some discomfort. You're making it uncomfortable. And the way I figure is I don't want to knee my dog, especially if it's a pain tolerant lab or pit bull, and there's other pain tolerant dogs too, but those are the two that come to mind. I don't want to knee them so hard that they go, oh, I don't want to do that again. That hurt. That was uncomfortable. I don't like that. Um, I don't recommend it. Yeah. If you want to add one last thing, if you want to add some positive punishment, in other words, a bad behavior makes a bad thing happen, I often will yell ow or no, something that my dog would go, oh gosh, sorry. Some dogs, a loud no, they would hit the dirt and run away from home. Other dogs would be like, so it depends on the temperament of your dog. But taking away intention, because usually that's what's being demanded.
Okay. Yeah, it does make sense what you're saying if you're saying that you don't want to touch them at all, because obviously raising your knee is going to be a form of touching them.
But that's not the main point. The main point is people are looking at that as something to make a behavior get less. And so it have to be more painful than most people make it. And I don't want to knee really hard in my dog's chest where their heart and lungs and their internal organs are. I could knee a dog hard enough where they would go, I'm never jumping on you again. But I don't want to walk that line between making a behavior get less and injuring my dog.
That
Now,
makes a
I
lot
know
of
I have,
that
and
makes a
other
lot of
people
sense.
have turned to the side and raised your leg as protection to yourself, but that's more like putting up a barrier. That's not really using pain to diminish behavior. Um, so I find that the turning away, the making the sound, the not giving your dog one thing that anything they want is way more successful.
So you mentioned the two breeds. If somebody has a question about the the basically you're talking about the pain tolerance of a dog.
Correct. And the sensitivity, like if I yell no around one of my sensitive border collies, they're going to be like, oh my gosh. If I yell no around a client's Doberman lab mix who comes to daycare, she's like, what? Were you talking to me? So it's not just pain, but it's emotional tolerance.
So
Yeah.
how, if somebody wasn't familiar, where would they go to look for that information as far as the particular breed that they had?
The best thing to do is their dog will tell them. If you do something and your dog slinks away, it was too harsh. If your dog jumps on your back when you turn your back and they're scratching down your back, you might have to get a little louder, leave the room, slam the door. The dog's going to let you know what the conversation is coming across as. The reading isn't really where it's at. Results are. Yeah. So, shall I go on to the second
Thank you.
pitfall?
Yes, please do.
And I love your questions. Keep them coming. So the second one is a lot of times we fall into this pitfall of if we say a command more than once and louder and more adamantly, we figure the dog's going to understand what we mean. Our job in the beginning of any behavior we want to shape and change is to make sure that my dog and, that our dogs and ourselves, we have the same understanding. So a really nice way to teach a behavior, let's say teaching an 8-week-old puppy to sit. We want to lure the behavior with a treat or a toy. So we put the lure on the nose and we move the food where we want the body to go. So for the butt to sit down, we lure the nose up and back. If you move the lure way high, the dog jumps. If I want to lure a spin, I'm going to keep it on the nose and turn them in a spin. I can lure them into a down. I can lure them into getting up, letting them know when they're allowed to get up from the sit or down or wait or stay. So the way I train new commands, and I'm sure I'm not the only trainer that does this, is you connect the word with the behavior time and time and time again, with followed by rewards. So the dog is like, oh, this is cool. The more they enjoy what you're teaching them, the more they're going to start offering it. And so as I lure the behavior into an SIT, I'm saying SIT because usually I'm talking to people and their dogs are right there. It's like spelling the word ball. Usually when I'm luring them into a sit, I say sit the moment their bottom hits the ground. Good job. I give the cookie. And it's the repetition of that. I don't mean 20 times in a row, but over days and weeks. It's hearing it, doing it, the word starts making sense, as opposed to we think our dogs came with a dictionary, and if we just say words, the dog will, figure it out. Our dogs really have the harder challenge. Our job is a little easier. They're trying to figure out, they don't even speak a language in the way that we do. And they'd really try to figure it out. And dogs are very body language oriented. So I always teach hand signals too. Their first language is not words, it's body movements. So making sure that when you use a command that you've trained it well in different situations, different distractions, and you are only using a word once you've trained it really well. It can take weeks, sometimes months, but usually weeks. So that's another pitfall, is not saying a command again and again and again, and your dog's looking at you like, I really don't know what you want.
So what you were saying was that they've got to determine when the right time is to use only the command and not use the the verbal command. Is that what I understood you to say?
I didn't quite understand your question. Say it again.
Okay, that what you're saying is you're going to keep repeating the
No,
with like moving the nose back
no,
like you were
I only
saying.
say the command when the dog is doing it. I say it once as they do it. I pair
Right,
their body motion with the word once
right.
and
But
then release them from it.
you're
Go ahead.
talking about people identifying when to use only the command by itself, right? That you were
No, I'm talking
saying,
about how to train a command.
okay. So what was the point about when um, when you start using only the command that would could take weeks or months?
You don't want to give a word, tell your dog a word that they haven't learned yet. You want to make sure they're really understanding it. And I'm going to address, I think what you're asking about, I'm going to address the order of when to use a command when they finally understand it. I think one of my future pitfalls may help fill in the blanks on your question. I think. If not, I'll try and clarify. So did that help a little bit? Little clarification, little tiny bit? Okay. All right. So number 3, um, let's say you've trained a command, your dog knows sit, your dog knows let's go, your dog knows come, whatever you're using. The only time you don't want to overly do this one thing is for a stay command, but pretty much any other command. Do you want to guess what the first step should always be in terms of how I train? Do you want to guess what it is? What you need to do first before the command? Once you've taught the command? What do you think needs to happen always before you tell your dog something to do? I'm putting you on the spot.
Make sure you have their attention somehow.
Hey, you pass. Good job. Yep. We need to make sure we have their eye contact. So, a lot of my students will say sit, 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 sit. And nagging is a really great way for your dog to just go, whatever. They don't know what they're doing and they just kind of blow you off. And then the human gets frustrated and we don't get anywhere. Or they say the dog's name again and again and again. I think no nagging is my last number. We'll get to that in a minute. So if their name doesn't get their attention because they're distracted or you're outside or there's a bunny over there, there's a squirrel over there, or their best, friend is across the street, we need to, and I do this with 8-week-old puppies. I do this with my kindergarten classes. We need to make sure that we have a repertoire of sounds to do. And a lot of adults get embarrassed doing this in front of other people. Kids actually do really well on this. So learning how to kiss or clap or something that the dog goes, oh, what was that? So that we don't repeat the same thing again and again, especially if it's not working. And I've had people say, "Oh, you told me not to use their name." And I just want to clarify, using their name is okay, but if they're really distracted, especially with come and they're far away, I don't even start with the name. I might start with puppy, puppy. Anything high pitched for most dogs, they turn and look. So getting their attention quickly and giving the command the moment you get the eye contact, because for some dogs, if they're really distracted, they're going to look at you for half a second and turn away. Bless you. So shall I go on, or did you have anything to clarify on that?
No, I thought that was a very good clarification of that. Thank you. And
So
excuse my sneeze.
the fourth tip is after we get their attention, after we give a command that we've already taught, a lot of people will say a command again and again if the dog doesn't do it, or if they do it, a lot of times we only acknowledge our dogs when they're being naughty, and when they're laying down at our feet or they're being really good, we kind of forget about them. So we want to make sure that we make it worth their while to do what we've told them, asked them to do, especially when they're learning. And so this is a little beyond the scope of our show tonight, so I don't want to go into great depth. But basically, with obedience training, you're either giving good things, taking good things away, giving bad things, or taking bad things away to change behavior. So I'm going to give you an example. Most everybody knows what positive reinforcement is. Good behavior makes a good thing happen. Dog sits and I give them eye contact and I give them a treat and I'm like, oh, you're such a good baby. Good job. If they don't sit because they're worried or distracted or I didn't do my due diligence, I don't get them in trouble. That's feedback to me that I didn't do my work. But if they're kind of like, nah, I don't really want to, you can't make me. I'm a teenager. I don't have to do that. I'd rather go dig a hole. If I let them blow me off and go on about their agenda, because obedience is really yielding to the will of another. If I let them do their agenda, I lose a lot of authority and respect. I love my dogs. My dogs and I cuddle and kiss and, watch TV together, but they have to do what I tell them. It could save their life. It helps them feel more secure to have guidelines and rules. It makes my life so much easier if I say, wait, load up, leave it, drop it. If all the commands I've taught them, it just makes life so much nicer to have a trained dog. So back to what I was starting to say. So if they don't do it and there's no consequence other than the human nagging, talking in a language that's not the dog's, the dog just blows off the sit, 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 sit. No, 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 sit, sit, sit. So there's two ways to tell your dog they're wrong. One is positive punishment, and people don't have to memorize it. It's just to be aware because you're doing this all the time. This operates in our lives like a speeding ticket is a positive punishment. Bad behavior makes a bad thing happen. So you can either do positive punishment to your dog, which would be something aversive, something painful, something upsetting like a poke or a yank or a bad, big loud sound. The drawback with positive punishment is that for some dogs, they're like, what? What we think is stern, some breeds, some dogs are like, no, it doesn't matter. Some dogs are very sensitive, and too much positive punishment can really hurt your relationship with your dog over time. And it's probably where trainers disagree the most. There's some trainers that say never, ever do anything aversive to your dog. Don't ever say no to them. Don't ever do A, B, or C. And then there's other trainers, more old school trainers that are like, yeah, pop the choke chain. So there's such a wide range. And positive punishment could be anywhere from a firm no to dog abuse where you're going to jail. I mean, it's such a wide range. What I like to do better, and I'm not saying I never use, a sound that says, don't do that. But especially for smarty pants dogs, because I've owned a lot of smarty pants dogs in my life. Really high drive smarty pants dogs, lots of herding breeds and mixes. Negative punishment, which means you're taking something away that's going to lessen a behavior, that has typically no bad side effects. It's all psychological. There's no physical pain. There's no fear. There's no intimidation. You basically mark the behavior. I use too bad as opposed to a clicker or a yes, which means you did it right, you earned something. Too bad means you did it wrong, you're losing. So for example, if I tell my dog to sit and they're like, I don't really want to. So I could growl at them. I could say no. I could use something aversive. Depends on the dog. Depends on the human I'm working with, what their belief system is. Because I think trainers should help people work with their dogs within their philosophy as much as possible. And there's so many different approaches to dog training. So I will take something away from the dog that bums them out. So it's more emotional duress, but it's nothing horribly serious. So I'll go, too bad. I'll show them the cookie. I'll let them sniff it and I go, and I turn away and I put it in my pocket. I ask again. If I've asked a dog to sit before I throw the toy, or maybe they're jumping up at the toy, too bad. I turn away. I play with the toy. If I'm asking a dog to sit and wait at the door, who's been trained to do that, and they start to pop up before I've released them with another command, too bad, and the door closes. So it's basically taking away what the dog wants when they're wrong. It's so powerful, and it really helps dogs be engaged in the process because they want stuff just like we do. They want food, they want love, they want attention, they want freedom, they want to go out the door, in the door. They want the toy, they want belly rubs. So giving and taking away good things are my two favorite ways to train. Then there's a fourth approach that we don't use as much, but I do want to just mention it: negative reinforcement. Most people misunderstand that word phrase. Negative means you take something away. You take something bad or aversive away when the good behavior happens. So I'm holding my dog's collar and they're going, I don't like it. I don't like it. And they're putting their mouth on me and I don't like it. When do you think I take my hand off? The moment they relax. Now, this wouldn't work with an aggressive dog. But so giving and taking good and bad things away is what I call feedback. So if you put it all together, attention, command, feedback. And when you put all three of those steps together, you're connecting with your dog, you're communicating a word that they've learned, what you want them to do, and then you give them a report card. And so it's really good to give them things that they want. They sit and then you let them run out the door. They sit, you tell them, eat your breakfast. The more structure we can incorporate into our dogs' day-to-day lives, it's better for them, especially multi-dog households. My last tip, and I'm going to wrap up
Oh,
unless there's questions. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Um, so, so you mentioned the choke chain. So could you talk about the use of a leash, choke chain, and so forth for a minute? Or do you
Sure.
want to go
So
to five and come back to that after?
yeah, the fifth one I mentioned already is not nagging, not saying commands again and again, not saying no, 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 no again and again, not saying their name or making a sound again and again, just getting very crisp and clear and changing your approach if it's not working so your dog doesn't learn to blow you off. So those are the 5 things, and I'll answer your question. So not looking at your dog and talking and touching them when they're wrong. Because when I say too bad and I take something away, I'm not giving them a lot of eye contact. Training commands first, pairing the word and the behavior, getting their attention before you give a command, giving a command once and giving feedback, and not nagging on any of those steps. So choke chains, gosh, you could talk to 10 trainers and you'd probably get 15 responses. So I'm going to give you my response because, there's always different ways to do things. My experience is, and I've been doing this mostly full time for, gosh, 25, 26 years. I can't believe I'm getting that old. And most people with the choke chains do not use them properly. If they're teaching them to walk on a loose leash, the choke chain is always snug and choking the dog. And it can collapse the trachea. It can do permanent damage. And if you think about it, well, let me back up one step. One positive thing is dogs can't slip their collar typically with a choke chain. I do like martingales better than choke chains because they don't keep choking. They stop themselves with the O-ring. But if you think about it, a choke chain is a positive punisher, typically. You inflict pain or discomfort when your dog does something wrong. They jump on you, they pull, and you do a quick pop. That's how they're, my understanding. I've never, used one other than in the show ring because they're required. And I'm not using them to punish. It's because it looks cute and pretty. But if you think about it, to make the pain enough for the dog goes, oh, I'm going to stop pulling. And again, we have our pain tolerant dogs. It needs to be high up around the neck. It needs to be slack and then popped pretty hard where the dog goes, oh, ow. And like I said, there's a fine line between using it to stop a behavior or doing damage to your dog. So I don't use them. I don't recommend them. Do I turn people away like some trainers do if they show up with a choke chain? No, but I might help them by the end of the first or second class try something that would work better for their dog and that might not cause damage and where their dog's not gagging all the time. Because ultimately, in my opinion, I'm the best tool to teach my dog not to pull on leash and just pay attention to me and walk with me. Those extra tools are nice, but they're not to be used instead of training, if that makes sense.
It does. So the way I was taught was, like you said, that it would be loose, and then you just give that jerk because that's their cue that they're not doing something correctly. So are you saying that doing it that way can also damage the trachea, or is
If
it
you do it
just
hard
if
enough,
they're
yep.
keeping it?
If you do it hard enough, you can. And most people do not use it correctly. It's always gagging the dog. They're always pulling on it. And it's like the nagging thing again. It's nagging. I'm not saying some people don't use it correctly. They do. But in general, I would and if it works and you never have to do it again, that's the point of punishment. It's not to have to use it their whole life. So I'm not a fan of them. I like martingales. I like general leader head collars. I've never used it, but a prong collar, even though they look nasty and people are like, oh no, those are very abusive. They're actually safer because they put pressure all the way around the neck. And you can get ones that are martingale so they don't close all the way. And then you can put rubber tips on them so the pain and the cutting into the neck is less. I don't use any of that on my dogs, but because I train them to not pull me and to walk well. And I start that at 8, 9 weeks of age. But if I had to pick between a prong and a choke in terms of safety and damage, prongs are actually safer with the tips and the martingale where it stops itself. It doesn't keep choking.
Okay, that's really good to know because, like you said, I think a lot of people. I mean, that's what I would have thought. I was taught that the prong were not good and that the choke chains were okay. So, and like you said, it's your opinion, but what the argument that you're making, I think, is it sounds very viable.
Yeah. And
So,
like I said, I don't use prong collars on my dogs. I find other tools better. But like if I had to, or if I was an 80-year-old woman and I didn't have much strength and my dog was really pulling me hard, I might have to go for something a little harsher. But flat collar is not going to do much for a dog that's not trained. In my opinion, as a trainer, the best thing to do is training. And then these tools become very secondary. But yeah, no, I'm not a fan of choke chains.
okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add, or?
Maybe I'll save it for another time. I was going
Okay,
to talk about sit to say please and changing a dog's mindset and respect, but maybe we could do it another time so it doesn't get too lengthy, if that sounds okay to you.
sure, that's
Okay.
fine. And I did want to give some recognition with with the products I was talking about before. I did find a platform that I could tell people specifically about this medicinal mushroom that we have in the pet ingredients, and that is the Great Discovery. I'll put the little. Maybe I won't. Yeah, oh, there we go. Emily and I are going to be doing opposite things because I'm finding new toys here. That's sort of what it's like, me and the toy box. Anyway, with the Great Discovery, I can put some information. I have a free course up there that tells about the mushrooms. It's more like if you're interested in medicinal mushrooms, this is what you look for, this is what you stay away from. And
Got
then
it.
there's another course that's whopping $4.99 if you dig deep in your pocket, that that actually talks about the king of mushrooms, and tells why it is the king of mushrooms in a deep dive. So, and then the other thing I would like to recognize is the World of Ability Podcast Network, and they're our sponsors. Um, Also, and they go with the philosophy that people who have disabilities are also have something to offer, and not just put them in a category of you have a disability, forget you. So they have a number of podcasts throughout the week, and we can, if you have a specific question about any of those, Cherie, you could ask. But so, like I said, several different podcasts with different topics. And the one is the World of Ability podcast, that people come on and talk about disabilities, or programs they offer um, that show the ability in everybody.
Nothing
So
comes to mind to ask you, but I do want to know, can I give out a phone number if people want to text me or reach me to find out more, if
you
there's a way they
may.
can use my services? Because I do offer remote services, both online and through video lessons. And I always give
Yes.
people something free to start. If somebody goes, I don't really know if you can help me, I'll talk with them for a while, find out what's going on, and then let them know how I would approach it, and then they can decide. They don't have to know for sure ahead of time. So if I can just give a phone number and a Facebook page, I would love that.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. I told
So,
you this is
I'm
new for
sorry,
me.
what?
So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could make the banner to put up there with the phone number for her, please.
So she has the Facebook page, Our Furry Friends Training, and that's great. You can always Facebook message me there. I'm a big Facebook person. And the other option is you can text or call me, and the phone number is 530-622-7877. And that's 530-622-7877. And I do have an online course that people can take that's all about sitting and greeting people at the door and all the things that build up to it, so that people can work with me anywhere in the world of pets. So yeah, so
Great.
thank you.
Yeah. We're going to
Thank
get
you,
this up.
Emily.
Let me see if
So
I
I
get it.
don't know how to sign off
You
because I've never
created
done this
it,
before.
I punched the little button. So let's see what happens here. Nope,
Yeah,
not
the
yet.
phone number showed up for a second.
Oh, it
Oh, and
did?
it's underneath my name. That's very cool. Fancy. Yeah, I've never been on a podcast before. I've been on radio shows and TV shows, but my first podcast. So thank you.
All right. Well, we hope you'll come back,
Thank
and
you.
really appreciate you being here. And that was great information. So we will make sure that you don't feed your dogs a lot of food from the Thanksgiving table.
That's right. Tell people.
Make
Yep.
sure that you figure out what's good for them and what's okay for them
Yep.
and what
Pancreatitis is
isn't.
not something to mess with for sure with our
Yeah,
dogs.
no turkey bones for sure.
All right.
So,
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Emily.
yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.